All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Oregon State University Permaculture Design Course Pro. This is our office hours. Nice to see everybody here. I believe this is office hour number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we just have 3 more to go before we finish, including this one. Nice to see everybody. As usual, going to go through the questions that are on the doc. And if anybody has extra questions, feel free to put them into the doc. We'll go back and forth and answer the questions as we go about. And then if we have extra time, I will go through the assignments that are coming up and we can have a quick conversation about some designs. I'm just going to mute everybody. There we go. Awesome. Cool. All right. So jumping into this. Yeah, I think I talked a little bit about this before, but about 8 years ago, I started specializing in decision making, especially on landscapes, lives, businesses, things of that nature, called values-based decision making. If I could start again, it'd be the one tool that I would have at my side. And for the first time in 8 years, I'm running a group course. I normally do one-on-one work, but I have an apprentice, and so we are building opportunities for him to learn. So in less than a month, May 7th is when the course will start. And if anybody's interested in the doc, we've got the values-based decision making link, and so there will be a week of sign up starting tonight for folks that are on that list that will get the best possible price on the course. And then after that, it'll go to the early bird price and then the regular price. So if that's of interest to you, check it out. And we'll jump into questions. Oh, the other thing I'll say is we just ran an amazing course called Eat Well, an introduction with Chef Seth Peterson, and it was phenomenal. If you're looking at the sort of missing link between growing great food and eating great food, I highly recommend the course. It'll be available for purchase very quickly as a replay. And we've got a number of great courses coming up, like ferment and cured cooking, curing preservation, and a number of others. So Florian had a question. 2 questions related to soil building. Fortunately, I may not be able to join the office hour call due to business reasons. I highly appreciate your feedback on the questions, though. Maybe it's interesting for other students as well. Thanks in advance. Cardboard for soil building. I heard most of the cardboard. Let's get this a little bigger. I heard most of the cardboards, even when they are not colored, contain toxic substances and may contaminate soil. Are there any criteria to determine if they're hazardous or not? So this is my approach after doing this for about 13 years. And so you can, well, I'll go through this step by step, but generally, if it is a brown, non-waxy cardboard, I'm fine with it. I'll use it pretty much without reservation. Once we get into plasticized cardboards or waxy glossy cardboards, white cardboards, sort of thin paper like receipts, things that have glossy colored inks, there are some problems, but at the same time, where else is it going to go? So I'm also of the belief that, are we going to landfill it? Are we going to burn it? Or can we put it into some kind of soil remediation process? And this is where folks like Dr. Elaine Ingham and Lila Darwish, my friend who wrote Earth Repair, we've really got the data to show that is the amount of time that a quote unquote toxic or contaminant is in contact with soil and with active soil biology that can reduce the amount of toxicity in it, sometimes making that bioavailable or bio unavailable. So you may or may not want to put this type of material into a compost that you are actively putting into your garden, but it may be a compost that you're using strictly for remediation. So basically, plasticized cardboards, they're a problem. Most of these are going to hold some kind of plastic, which is some kind of processed hydrocarbon. And generally, I want that out of the garden because most plant roots, when they touch that, they're going to abort. They're going to die out. So I tend not to use it, or they'll wrap around it. They're just not going to use it as a cellulosic material that they can start to consume. Waxy or glossy, same thing. Anything that's white is usually white not because of chlorine, but with dioxin, which is a neurotoxin, which I stick away from. Any sort of white paper usually has BPA, And so I stick away from that as well. Most of the glue used in cardboard is from starch. It's from root vegetables sometimes, or cellulosic starch. So I don't really worry about that at all. If I see that it looks like glue and it's not just the starch glue, then yeah, that's definitely an issue. As I was talking about before, but contact with the soil food web can decompose these elements and make them bioavailable or bio-unavailable. So in my opinion, I use non-glossy cardboard without reservation. Glossy cardboard I'll use for pathways. Why? Because it takes it longer to decompose, and I generally don't want things in the pathway, so it's a nice way to use it. And then, yeah, just the same thing. Where else is it going to go? Burn, landfill. So when I'm developing gardens directly on grass and I'm building up, I'll use cardboard, place it down, and then I'll build up on top of it. And we do this normally with aged compost or aged horse manure. This is manure that's about 3 to 4 years old, and I check to see if we've got weeds growing in it, quote unquote weeds. The reason for that is that most horses and sheep actually have dewormers that are used on it. And when we take a look at the soil food web, we really want to be careful because nematodes and also earthworms, which aren't on this image, are essential to a healthy soil food web. And if you have a dewormer, you're going to be killing the nematodes and the earthworms. So that's one of those pieces that I'm pretty aware of. Using sheep manure and deworming agents are mouflon sheep are regularly dewormed. The goal of most deworm medication is not to be metabolized, true, but to leave the intestinal tract almost unchanged. This means that manure potentially contains a significant concentration of these medicines. No information can be found on degrading. Yeah, because they don't. They're persistent. And only when they have a lot of contact with active soil biology do they start to decompose or break down. So my approach is, 3 years of aging minimum. Test to see if there's weeds that are growing in there. If they do, normally you're fine. If you're seeing worms, normally you're fine. If you're not seeing those things, I wouldn't bring it into the garden. I've seen it happen twice where somebody said, yeah, this material's fine. This is back before I tested everything and was a lot more trusting of people. And that garden's growth was retarded for years. It stalled and it didn't move. And so we ended up having to remove the soil, put it into a long-term compost and bring in new material because it just didn't work. Is there any danger of soil organisms or even for humans if they eat food that was grown in these soils? So there can be danger in that dewormer may not just be a dewormer. It may have neurological issues, as a lot of biocides do. That will be specific to dewormer by dewormer, and you'll have to do your due diligence and your research about that dewormer to see if there's issues that come into contact and what the hazardous assessment is of that. Great questions. Could you please explain details about the atmospheric nitrogen and the decomposers, about the atmospheric nitrogen and the decomposers? The atmospheric nitrogen and the decomposers. I think you're on here, Diana. Could you explain your question a bit more?
I'm asking that just because it's on the it's on the so I didn't know where to go.
It's really hard to hear you.
Oh yeah. Sorry, can you hear me better now?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. I asked that because the slides, so I didn't know anything about that.
You didn't know anything about atmospheric nitrogen and its fixation?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know anything. I like it's on the slide. Water, minerals, producer, primary consumer, blah, blah, blah. But underneath it has these decomposers.
We can't hear you again.
You know the slide I'm talking?
No, I'm not certain what you're talking about. Is it a link within the course or an image?
Oh, there's slides, slides, right?
Lights?
It's
Or you're muffled again. In the slides. Okay.
okay. So
in
the
which
14. Can,
no, I'm having a bit of a hard time hearing you. I think Stephen is thinking that it's in some of the slides, and his question's a good one. Which page are you referring to? Are you there?
yes, I'm just going to copy and paste the
Okay,
link.
perfect.
What is the chat? Yeah, sorry.
Local ecology survey. Yeah. Okay. So assignment 14. Let me just pull that up.
Yeah, let's talk about this. I've been having nightmares about this assignment.
Oh man. Okay, I'm just pulling it up here. I also have a dog that feels like they need all the attention right now. Okay, so in 14, we've got slide 89, ecological succession. And then, oh, I see. You're talking about slide 91 and the atmospheric nitrogen and how it interacts with the decomposers. Is that what we're asking? I don't know anything about it. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. So there are at least 2 videos about nitrogen and the nitrogen cycle in the course. But basically, nitrogen is important for all living things. So it's a key role in plant growth. Too little nitrogen, plants can't survive. Too much, it's toxic. And basically, there's an amazing book if you want to go into the history of artificial nitrogen called The Alchemy of Air. It's one of those incredible scientific prose books, scientific nonfiction, and pretty remarkable. So when we take a look at atmospheric nitrogen, we have nitrogen that is in the atmosphere. There's huge pools of nitrogen gas, N2. But most of that nitrogen is unavailable to plants because it's gaseous and can't necessarily be contacted or directly to plants. So to be used by plants, that nitrogen has to go through a process of fixation, nitrogen fixation. And nitrogen fixation is a process where we have a number of different elements or different biological elements, but also lightning actually fixes nitrogen as well, to convert that nitrogen into a form that plants can use. Yeah, I want to think about this a little bit in terms of how deep we want to go into this, because when we take a look at nitrates and nitrites, we get into the specifics of it, but basically decomposers have the ability in many ways to transform that nitrogen, either through transforming and working with different rhizome bacteria. Those are bacteria in and around the rhizosphere. That's the couple of millimeters around the rootlet, the little fine hairs, to bring in nitrogen into that root area. And through decomposition, you can make that nitrogen bioavailable for plants. I would say you should watch the nitrogen video a little bit more. That's the basic conversation about it. But this is also, if you've ever gone into, what is it now? Oh, it'll come to me. Aquaponics. So when we're working with fish and we're working with plants, it's a great example of how the nitrogen that comes out of fish needs to be transformed by plants before, or by bacteria before it's available to plants. And this is one of the things that decomposers or the soil food web does well, is it transforms nitrates into nitrites, and then has them available for the plants themselves. And so that nitrogen comes from the atmosphere. That atmosphere is unavailable. We have organisms that then fix that, like rhizomatous bacteria, or rhizomatous nitrogen fixing bacteria, and then sinks it into the soil. And then you have different soil food web elements that then convert it basically into the ability of being taken up by the plants. And this is the interesting thing about the soil food web, is that what plants need on a moment by moment basis, they're determining by how they are giving off the carbon that they've chopped off of the CO2 that they've intaken, and through the process of CO2 or photosynthesis have cut the oxygen off, are respiring that off, and then that carbon is becoming a charged long chain carbohydrate. So Dr. Elaine Ingham likes to call them the cookies and cakes and creams. And basically when they're put out into the rhizosphere, they have an electrical charge. That electrical charge is specific to bring in the certain bacteria or fungi that will have the nutrition within them that they will need on a second by second basis. It's incredible, some of the science that's been done about this, and just showing how specific and how almost sometimes millisecond this plant is pulling and asking for different types of nutrition. So when that charge goes out, that bacteria and that fungi come close to the rhizosphere. And when they're coming close to the rhizosphere, basically the plant through eons has learned these are the bacteria. If we put out this carbohydrate, we'll bring them close. But the funny thing is, it's not bioavailable. The only way that that bacteria and that fungi, and the many, many, many types of them, will release the nutrition that's inside of them is if they're predated, if they're eaten by the higher trophic levels of the soil food web. So once those higher levels of trophic food web then eat the bacteria, the fungi, what's left then in terms of defecation and what's left of the body of the fungi, body of the bacteria that's now dead, is now bioavailable. And that's why the soil food web needs those trophic layers, because without those trophic layers, without them being eaten and consumed, that material isn't there for them. And that's again why it's so important to have this complete soil food web, because not only does it provide nutrition, it provides nitrogen. And when we take a look at artificial nitrogen, actually all artificial fertilizers, what we're doing is we're telling the plant, don't worry about putting out carbohydrates. And so we train the plant off of its natural biorhythm. We're basically saying, here, we'll take care of it for you. And what happens is you end up taking on the work of the carbohydrates and the entire soil food web systems. You're basically making a plant that's dependent on you. There's some interesting memes and things like that saying this is your plants on drugs. And to a certain extent, it's true, right? They're becoming dependent upon you providing them fertility. They don't have to go out and get it and interact with all the different elements around them. So a couple of things in terms of fixing nitrogen. One is you want to introduce nitrogen fixing plants, which usually have good association with nitrogen fixing rhizomatous bacteria. And what they'll do is they'll start to fix this. And you can see them if you ever pull up your plant roots, nitrogen fixing plant roots, you'll see these little nodules, sometimes pink, sometimes yellow, sometimes white. And there's specific clusters of bacteria that are there that are fixing nitrogen, fixing it out of the soil, fixing it out of the atmosphere, and putting it into a form that the tree can use. And then some of these plants, things like fava beans, for example, me and a colleague of mine, we were chatting. There's no reason to ever put any fertilizer on your tomatoes if you can grow favas. Favas are an early crop. They're what's called a cold weather crop, cool weather crop. Grow them early, bring them up to flowering, and at flowering you can cut down the favas and it produces an incredible bloom of nitrogen, because favas are a nitrogen fixing plant. And that's what's incredible about understanding the nitrogen cycle, is that once you understand how it works, you don't necessarily have to be at the whim of fertilizers or artificial nitrogen. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay, great. Awesome. I'm just noticing that somebody's live. I'm just going to mute them. Thanks a lot. Yeah, you're so welcome. Sorry about that. I was having a hard time hearing you. And thanks so much, Steve, for helping me decode what was going on. Super. Okay, great. Let's get back to if there's any other questions. And about Simon 15, I watched your YouTube video about it. I'm still not clear to me how to choose the site cross-section. Could you please clarify? Yeah, sure, no problems. So new computer, and I think I can pull up Google Earth Pro at the same time. And actually, if that question was from you, Diana, if you could put a link to your assignment, we can actually go through your assignment directly. We can go through your site. That's probably better, actually. Yeah, Steve, I can walk you through as well. Steve, if you want to put in your
Awesome, thank you.
your portfolio as well, we can go through that. Whoever throws it down first, we can go through it. We can just walk you through it step by step. Doesn't really make, my site is so small. It doesn't, yeah, it doesn't actually. So we'll go through it here. So we've got Steve's up, and we're going to pull up his base map because that begins the conversation, or a map that shows quite a bit of detail. And Steve's got a really nice map, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, no worries. Okay, so let's get onto this base map, and this is the one. Actually, the water one, I noticed that you've changed the way you did your contours. We'll use that one. Okay. Or I did just see it. Ah, there we go. Cool. That'll do. So we'll share this. I think it's this one. Everyone can see Steve's map there. Thumbs up, plus good. Okay, cool. So on this site, and this is a great example. I might have said this to you before, Stephen. If I haven't, it's best usually to keep your markings of your contours off the map itself. It just leaves us more space to contemplate and think and all that. So usually I'd put all of these off to the side here so I can read them. So we looks like we've got, what is this, 4-foot interval?
Yeah, just about. It was converted from metric, and it made way more sense in metric, but
sure. Yeah, it seems odd because this is 4 feet and then this is 3 feet. This one I have no idea what it is. This is 358, so this is 2.6. So yeah, 3 feet. So 3 feet. Okay. Something.
Yeah, give or take. It's consistent with itself, just
Good.
not with our brains. It's point something.
Yeah, it's like the scale that's broken as long as you use the same one.
So, yeah.
Okay, so if I understand this correctly, here, Steve, we've got this as a low point, and this is our high, right?
That's right. That's right.
Cool. And here's our house. So if this were my site, what I'd want to do is I'd probably want to get a sense of the longest run with the most amount of elevation change. So I'm going to bring up a couple of cross sections here. Cross section.
Also, I did also do a cross section, kind of. Again, I skipped the hard assignment, but I did do a cross section. If you want to take a look at that, and it goes kind of from the second highest point. It's on slide. I can give you the number.
Yeah.
You want to take a look at that because that one's done-ish, and you get to see my cool word art. I didn't know where the clip art was. That's going to be slide number 97. If you go to slide 97.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you're getting this. Basically what we're doing is when we create this line, this cross section, basically we're going to label this A to A apostrophe or A to B. If we're doing multiples, we'll label them A to A apostrophe. This gives us the ability to do multiples. So if we go A to A apostrophe, and then when we come over to our next slide, then we'll do the same things just so that way we're very clear on what the direction is. And if you don't do this, I'll ask you to do this afterwards. So A to A apostrophe. So first and foremost, we do that. We'll come back to this in a quick second because I just want to talk about why you might
Perfect,
choose a certain section to do a cross section. So in this case, we've got a couple of low-lying areas that are wet, that are low and slow. And so there may be an opportunity there to potentially dig these out more. Whenever anybody asks me the question of where do we make the pond, it's always where does the water pool first and foremost, because the land's telling you where it might want to be. And then as I take a look at this, we've got sort of a high spot that goes down from the top of the site all the way down to the lowest site. And I probably cut this way. I know, Steve, you did something more so like this. The reason why I would do it like this is it gives me more distance on the site, and chances are there's going to be some propagation or some cultivation areas here. The other thing I would do is I'd probably do a similar thing that goes from this top down to this small low area. And one of the reasons I like doing these is that it especially if you've never done cross sections before, is it's great to actually see low areas that come back up and are not just perfect slopes. And then depending on if you do other cultivation in these areas, you would you'd want to bring in another cross section just to show what these elevational changes would be. But basically we're doing cross sections to see where and how does water flow. If we're doing tree systems, we're doing it to do what's called a solar assay, so that way we can see if the way we spaced our trees with relationship to our summer sun and our winter sun actually gets them the amount of sun they need, which is for most fruiting trees, we're looking at 10 to 12 hours. And so our spacing of them at maturity should be at a place so that way we have as much solar aspect as possible. I don't know if I would do, yeah, in terms of just this first assignment, those are probably the two I would do. And of the two, I think your initial impulse was right, over the house and into this area. So what we do next is we'll bring in a grid, and I talk about this in the I don't want to clear all these, just a second one. There we go. I talk about this in the tutorial of bringing in a grid and then aligning it to your scale. So if it's 16 feet, if it's 80 feet, whatever it is, that's fine. But we're basically going to align it to our scale and then align it to here. And we're actually going to get a sense of when we get these drops. So if it's 358 to 364, for example, then we have that ability to bring this in. Can I copy this? Yeah, I can. So I can go through this myself, make a copy of the original presentation, get rid of that piece. So this allows me to work with Steven's map here and help to build this in real time to show everybody how this is done. Same thing I did in the tutorial. So we're going to put this here. Great. Awesome. Yeah, match everything. Cool. So we're going to take one of these grids. I'm going to bring it over into, and then I'm going to change. Sorry about that. We're going to get rid of that. And then format options. And I'm going to do an adjustment on the transparency because I want to be able to see through this a bit. I think we've seen this problem before. One of the things about this program is that sometimes not everything works perfectly because it's free. Cool. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to line it up with my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh my goodness, it's almost perfect. That never happens. So basically, each one of these is roughly 10 feet, which is great. So each square is 10 feet. Just going to make it a little bit smaller, a little bit persnickety. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah, that's definitely roughly right. Maybe a little bit more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, that's good. Cool. Going to zoom back out. Go to fit. Okay. Oh, no. Fit, please. And then no more of that. Great. So now we're going to go back to that line, and I'm actually going to draw the line specifically on the map because I want to come back to it. Great. I'm going to delete this because I don't need it. Awesome. Gonna change a bit of this, gonna do an end of both sides, gonna make it a little bit thicker and gonna turn it red so I can see it. Awesome, cool. I like going over the property line just so I'm showing that elevational change. And then here, I'm just going to bring this over here. Make this a little nice. Now, I'm doing this with a grid, but you can do this with a ruler. So if you brought your scale over and you turned it into a 1/10 ruler, you could do the exact same thing. And again, we've lost the opacity of this. So I'm just going to refresh. Cool. All right. So now at this point, what I'm doing is I'm basically going through and I'm creating a scatter plot. Oh, of course you wanted to lose it all of a sudden. All right. I'm just going to move it up a bit. Can't be bothered to go back and forth on this. So basically what we have here, and I usually do this on iPad or with a pencil and paper and a grid, is we're getting a sense of how this all looks. So let's call this line up here. Let's call this line our imaginary grade. So up here, we'll call this our imaginary grade. And basically what we're doing now, oops, where do we go? Basically what we're doing now is we're going step by step as we go along here. So this is 371, this is 374. So let's call this 374, and 374 goes down to 358. So our lowest point is going to be 16 feet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's not enough. So let's move this line up again, maybe to here. And then we've got, that's 15 and we need 16 and I want space to go. So I'm going to put it a little higher. I'm realizing now that you may not be following me because I'm doing most of this in my head. So I'll explain what I'm doing. Show your work, Javin. So basically what I'm doing is I'm taking the highest line on the property or height of the property, 374 feet, and I'm minusing 358. So I understand how many units are we dropping in this landscape, because I want to know how many units are moving down in this landscape. So basically I'm trying to get a sense of what's the space I need for my for my cross section, because I'm going to need this space. So as we get to this mark on this line, I'm going to move this actually a little bit so it's a bit easier. It's the nice thing about this, you can make it easier on yourself. So this is 374. So we're going to call this line here 374. So this line and this line will be 374. So this point right here is going to be 374 feet in elevation. So basically I'm going to take a little drawing tool, maybe a scribble, and go all the way up and go, okay, this is going to be 374. So this is 374. So I'm going to take my text tool. A little bit difficult doing this in 374. A little bit difficult doing this in this program. Usually I do this in pencil and paper. Great. Now we're down to, and maybe Stephen, you can tell me what this marker is without me having to move everything. Or maybe not. Maybe I've lost you. 371.
No, I'm here. I'm just trying to find the
371. Cool. So 371 is basically, it crosses this line here, right? So we're going to go straight up and it's 371. So it's going to drop 3. 1, 2, 3. And then we're kind of halfway in between these. So 1, 2, 3, and right about here. Cool. So I'm going to go back to my scribbly. 1, 2, 3, right there. I'm going to go all the way up here and go 1, 2, 3, and scribble, scribble, scribble. Oh, what happened? Scribble, scribble, scribble. Nice. Cool. And that's 371. So take this, copy, paste, go down here. Just keep this going with me, 371. Awesome. Next, we've got a nice flat area where you'll normally see quite a number of houses, and shockingly we do. And we can see that this next line bisects just past this line down here. So it's roughly about here. And that line is
Plus 367.
367.
67, yeah.
Awesome. 367. So 367 minus 371 is 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then all the way over, and then crosses right about here. So that's my marker right there. And I will try to remember it as I go back up here and grab that darn squiggle. Just a one little squiggle. Come on. So 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then all the way over here, Z's. And then where are we here? There we go. Great. And now as we see that things are getting closer, this is going to be steeper. So it's not going to be as shallow as this slope is. So we're getting steeper now. And so 364, this was 367. So 364, it's going to be 3, 1, 2, 3, but it's going to be really close. So it's going to get a bit steeper here. 1, 2, 3, and then right about here. I think that's about right. And then similarly, this next one is unknown. So I think
Unknown.
we'll split the difference. I think it's 6 between these two. So we'll call it 3 feet. So we'll call it 361. So 361, 361.
Yeah, 361 is what it is.
Yeah, so we'll do it that way. And so it's going to be, again, 3 feet. 1, 2, 3. And a little steep here. And then we've got another one here. And this is 350. Oh, it'd be another 3 feet. 1, 2, 3 feet. And a little bit right here. Where'd you get this data from?
So I got it from one of the ones that could be very wrong, the scan, but I did, walk it and confirm that it felt, right. I didn't have any unexpected cliffs. But the measurements were,
looking at some of the images of what you've shown me, this doesn't look as steep as what you have, or what you have. It looks much more shallow than what this is. Like plotting it out looks super steep.
I think it's because it's sort of compressed, isn't it? Like because we're saying if it was over a longer distance, which it would be more shallow, right? Because we're saying like one box vertically is a foot, but we're saying that one box is 10 feet this way.
Right. Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, you are correct. I have compressed this. Good spot. I'm glad I did this publicly. Fun. So basically, whereas we've used this as 1 foot, each one of these is another
10 feet. Yeah.
Another 10 feet. Cool. All right. So the way we fix this, I'm glad I get to do this publicly. Hubris, thy is thy name. This one was what, 367? Yeah, 367. 367, and this one below was 364. 364. And then we decided that the next one was, I think, 361. Yeah, 361.
Yep.
361. And then the last one was 358. 358. Cool. So now what you would do is you would basically leave this box as 1, and for each one of these boxes you would add or you would multiply by 10 boxes. So we've got 1, 2, 3 and a half. So it'd be 35 feet. So we need 35 boxes going forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can do this again, and we're going to need a much smaller grid, which I don't know if these are actually going to cut it. So instead what we'll do is we'll create a brand new one, and we'll delete this one and we'll fit. And I will rotate this. And folks, this is us doing the work in real time. So know that this is what happens when you're doing cross sections. It takes time. You've got to muck about with it, especially if you're using a program that you don't usually use. I do most of my work in Morpholio Trace, which does all of this stuff for you, but it's great because we're doing it live. And I'm basically just making a big grid pattern by getting it to a good size and then mucking about as we go. Cool. Is this helpful for folks? Are we seeing that my mistakes are what we all have to go through when we do this?
Can you hear me?
I can now.
I can.
Oh, okay. I tried to fix it. I hope it works now. Let me see.
Oh, you're still cutting in and out. It's not consistent.
Okay. It seems like right. Water flow.
No, it's cutting in and out pretty good.
Okay.
Maybe you want to put your thoughts in the chat, Diana? Or maybe you want to call in. There is a call-in option if you want. And maybe we'll be able to hear you. All right, I'm going to go back to this. And what I did is I just took a screenshot. And that allows me to bring in this information in a way that I can just quickly reference it instead of going back and forth. So we'll start this again. And still need 16 feet. I think we're going to be actually even a bit too short. Let me just do the calculations here. So we need between 0.1 and 0.2, 374 and 375. We need 35 boxes. In between 37 and 36, we need half 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so call it 80 boxes. In between these, we need 30, call it 30, 30, 30, 20, 20, and 25. Okay, cool. So 115, 145, 165, and then that leaves us with 190. So basically we need 200. Okay, cool. So do we have that? These are 5, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 1, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Yeah, so I've got what? I've got 150. I don't have 200. Cool. So I've got to make this even smaller.
And it makes sense to pick a smaller cross section. Well, I guess a good question is, what are we trying to draw out by doing the cross section? Right? Because this right now is going to encompass, obviously the slope, grade over, specific areas, water flow, current vegetation, right? Is that it? Just sort of like a big way of getting a lot of information, or are we looking for something specific in doing the cross section?
Yeah. So basically when we do cross sections, we're trying to understand elevational differences, and we're trying to understand water flow, and we're trying to understand how things work in an elevational sequence. So some things will have flow over. So you'll have water that lands on, let's say, a house and then flows over into rain barrels. And then where does that flow over into, or how does this then stack upon other elements within the landscape? If we're thinking about doing tree production, let's say, and we're generally pretty sure that there's going to be a nursery or a tree place to be created someplace in the area. We may want to do an elevation there because we'll want to know where we're going to place those trees as it relates to solar access and solar lines. If we're thinking of putting in a road, we'll want to understand grades and where we may want to put in a road as it specifies to what the grade we're seeing is. So all of those are good reasons to do a study of cross section, and then that cross section then becomes another piece of the puzzle, especially when we're getting into water flow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sounds good. So do you want to keep going on this? Is this making sense?
Can you see on the chat?
We heard you a little bit.
On the chat.
The chat, it's about water flow, right? What happens if the site is flat? So the site is flat. What we're getting instead is we're getting elevational heights of our trees and our houses and different grades within them. Because when we take a look at, again, solar aspect or water harvesting, we're always thinking about what's called head height or head and the elevational, because that then gives us what potentially our pressure is going to be when we start working with rainwater harvesting or with swales. Does that make sense? Okay, so what don't you know about that in terms of it making sense? Because it is about water flow, but it's also about elevational heights of different elements, especially if we're taking a look at view corridors, for example. So I worked on a property, I don't know if I've talked about this one before, where the big desire was to see the ocean from their home. And in that home, they wanted to be able to also have blueberries. So in that conversation, we had to actively design for a view corridor that would allow them to see all the way to where they could see the ocean, but at the same time we had to put in a fair amount of food underneath them. So we actively had to go and do an elevational on this one, because their view corridor was right from this spot here. I'll pull up my little drawing. So they wanted to be able to see the ocean from here. So we developed elevations here, and then we did a study of each of these different terraces and how high those different trees would grow, so that way they would always see the ocean. But we added to it and we said, well, we could grow them another foot and you'd never see your neighbors, but you would always see the ocean, which was a huge value to them. So this was one of those processes where we brought this into play. Does that make sense now? So it's about how you will use every section. Yeah, exactly. Right. When we take a look at regenerative land design using permaculture as a tool within it, we're always taking a look at every single aspect of it. Most of us are ecologically illiterate. We don't understand slope. We don't understand how the sun wraps around that slope or how wind comes onto the slope. So it's another way to thin slice, literally thin slice a property into an elevation and see a different viewpoint, a different elevational viewpoint, and how the water might flow, how view sectors might be affected, how solar aspect might come into play. The sections are always triangles. What do you mean by that? The sections are always triangles. From a point to another, the lines.
I think it's because you made two lines. So the cross section is a single line, right? But I think you chose 2 points that started from one place and went sort of out. So I think the cross section is just one of those lines, or you could do multiple cross sections.
Right. So what I was trying to express here was this was the view corridor that they wanted. So this was the view that they had from their office. And so we then went in and we did a single cross section that ran, I think, from the top of the house down like this. And that cross section becomes a line that literally, if you were to take a knife and like a cake, cut down into that property and pulled it back, that is exactly what you would see from that landscape. How are we doing on that? Does that make sense? Yeah, here's a good one. So this is an example of a cross-section like the examples in the assignment. We're basically trying to see the entire cross-section and gradient, which is what we were just doing as we were going through and plotting it on a grid, and then putting in our tree heights, the different elevations of them, and giving us a sense of what this looks like. And especially when you're doing pools, seeing the elevation, the permanent elevation of pools and how they might cascade into one another is exceptionally important when we're managing for water. Maybe I really understand completely. I didn't. Yeah, I think for folks that have never done a cross section before, this can be a little much. So I think what might be helpful, and Stephen, you let me know. Do you want me to go ahead and go through the rest of this, and that way we can walk through it step by step?
So I'll sort of leave that to the group. I don't want to monopolize our time, and then also we're almost at time. I'm happy to hang out. Obviously, I'm not going to say no to some straight up Javan attention. But ultimately, I don't want to monopolize the time of the group. And if it's useful to the group, then yeah, we can keep going.
Yeah.
But
Well,
if some people have other questions or want to break, then we can do that as well.
Yeah, I think the only two things we have is this cross section conversation. So, well, that and you you put an assignment 14 help at the bottom. So why don't we?
Oh, and to be clear, yeah, mine was the question I had. I think I kind of got the cross section, but I'm happy to go through it because you're giving me way more insight than what I got out of it. So we should keep doing it. But I think the question I had was about the local ecology survey.
Right.
I'm sure that's like just research a thing and find out what birds like dandelions and like look it up, but I don't even know where to look for that stuff. So
sure. Okay. Why don't we do a short answer on the local ecology survey, and then I'll stay longer and we'll go through the site evaluate or the site cross section. And that way folks have to go, they can come back, they can watch us later. Does that sound good to the group generally? It looks like Adria said it'd be useful to see. I think I'm still stuck on what the cross section is trying to achieve. Yeah, I can go over that again. Anybody else want to weigh in? Any of the lurkers want to weigh in? I had somebody on a call yesterday jump in and say, I'm going to be a lurker. I was like, oh, that's fun. I've never had somebody just outright say it. It's great. Cool. Well, sounds good. I'll have to leave at 12, but I'll watch it again. Okay. Sounds good, Crystal. Awesome. Okay. So let's do this then. So yeah, local ecology survey is basically before humans. I know it's hard for some humans to think. Before humans, there was a natural ecology to a site. I mean that jokingly. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but basically when we come to design, and landscape designers are just absolutely at the top of the list of offenders on this, we don't ever take a look at the local ecology. What will this site naturally complex into? And I think I've talked to you guys about this before. In my design work, I've got these three circles. I've got inherent characteristics, client wants, needs, and resources, and then we've got regulations. And when those three circles coincide, there's a little sweet spot in the middle. And the inherent characteristics of the site are a blueprint or pattern for understanding that site. And so if we can understand what the climax ecology is, what is the climax flora, the climax fauna, now we have a sense, especially when we get into the families in that climax ecology, we have a sense of what we may want to put in there for our own personal design plants that might have needs that will, have yields that support human needs like fodder, fuel, food, pharmacological, all of those pieces. And this is why when you get into, oh, interesting, there's in this climate ecologies, we have the ribes family. It's like, great, now I've got all the current palette that's up to me. I can do black currants, I can do red currants, I can do white currants, I can do clove currants. Ribes odoratum, this wonderful ribes that smells like cinnamon and stays ripe on the bush for up to a month. All of these little elements are phenomenal. So when we get to that climate ecology, that becomes the blueprint of what we're looking at. And by using that as a blueprint, we can take a look at a site and go, okay, what are we actually seeing of the site in terms of its climate ecology, and what aren't we seeing? And that's why we wanted to take a look at that successional stages. Some of you may have this information available to you. Some of you may not. If you don't go to the point of, after going climax ecology or native ecology, or taking a look at conservation associations, taking a look at natural wildlife associations, taking a look at nature appreciation associations in and around your region and biome, once you get past that sort of tertiary literary review, then when you get to that next point, it's actively emailing biologists, conservationists, asking them those basic questions. For those of you in places that have placed a high priority on the natural environment, like British Columbia, Canada, where I live, we have the entire province designated into bioregions, and every single bioregion has a climax flora and fauna. This isn't true across the country, and it's not true internationally. We just are exceptionally lucky that that was placed at a high level, and the whole of British Columbia has been inventoried for its flora and fauna. So if you ever want to take a look into that, it's the bioregions or the bioregional classifications of British Columbia. For most places in the States, though, you do have at least a general bioregionality, which will give you a flora and fauna set. What you may run into problems with is what and how does that then complex over time? There may not be that research in terms of successional changes. So some of that is going to be your own research, taking a look around your area, going, what are the pioneers I'm seeing after disturbance? What does that complex into? But I tell you, there are university professors, there are university master's students, there are university PhD students that would love nothing better than to tell you the things they know, and they know this. And this is one of the wonderful things about academia, is that it produces a need to tell other people what people know. So if you haven't and you need to learn this, I highly recommend reaching out to the local universities that may cover your area geographically and saying, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a researcher who understands this. Who would I speak to? It'll take a little while. You may not have it ready for the assignment. So just say, hey, I'm researching this. I'm looking at this. I'll try and get to this by the end of the class or the course or whatever. If you don't find it by the end of the course, I'm not going to fail you because you can't find it. But I will tell you, if I spend 5 minutes looking and I find it, there will be a slight tongue lashing, because if I find it by putting in your local regionality and typing in climax ecology, conservation, wildlife, classification of wildlife, and if I find it in 5 minutes, there will be a very Canadian polite tongue lashing that you will barely feel. But all of that is there for the taking, or there for the researching. And then at that point, then you move up the chain to people who are specialized in this work, and you reach out to them and you say, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm working on. I'm trying to understand restoration and regeneration. Also restoration workers. So anybody who works in restoration ecology, rehabilitation, your watershed societies usually know this quite well, because they're very, very aware of when things move into an invasive conversation. Your invasive societies, they usually have a dial on what the natural native ecology is. If you're not familiar with the different Audubon books in the States, the Audubon books and the Lone Pine books kind of reign supreme in terms of local biota, flora and fauna. And then at that point, you're basically slotting things into that assignment. You're basically saying, okay, so this is, I'm going to pull this up. So we may as well do this while we're all here. Share screen. Here it is. Cool. So in this situation, we're just trying to say, generally, what are we seeing in each one of these successional stages? What are the different elements? What are we seeing? How is it moving through? And again, if you can't find it, just make a note being like, I don't know exactly what this stage is, but I think it might be this. Fantastic, right? Whenever I go onto a site, doesn't matter if I'm in Canada, or Kenya, Cuba, or Uganda, I'm always doing this biological blueprint resource and research. I want to understand what is natively naturally there, because I want to understand what am I looking at in terms of disturbance. This is a lifelong pursuit. You're not going to get this on the first run. I had a instructor who's now a really close friend and mentor, and he has spent so much time on just understanding plants. You can ask him any plant, any situation. He almost always knows the Latin. He knows how its reproduction system works. He knows its associates. He knows what plants it works well with. That's 25 years of education. And that's 25 years of hands-on education, because that's the education that actually sticks with us. So, don't think that you have to understand all of this now. We're basically, again, a PDC is a buffet, right? You're coming down like this buffet and you're just having little samplings of things. And because this is the pro, we take you to a different level, so that way you really get a sense of, okay, well, what else is there within this conversation? Birds should be pretty self-explanatory. We're asking you to go and start to become a connoisseur, a lover of your local fauna. And for those that haven't found the great loves of ornithology, this begins hopefully a bit of that love. We're trying to describe a local biological food chain here. So giving examples of different elements within your chain and being specific to your different elements. This assignment used to be a lot bigger. This is the smaller version. But over time, we wanted to just give you a taste of this conversation, so that way you would jump into it and really start to go, right, there is an existing ecology here. We're a part of it. We're not separate from it. We're not over it. We're not on top of it. There is an ecology here, and the appreciation of that ecology increases our natural flora and fauna education. And that flora and fauna education is essential to designing good systems. If you decide to come in and play designer, then the burden's always upon you to do good design. And if you don't understand what's existing, chances are you're not going to do great design. You're going to miss what's there. You're going to miss the conversation that's in front of you. So this is a really important element of understanding that conversation. And again, if you can't find the climax ecology, but you have some inklings, just state it. I'm still researching, but I think it's this. It looks like it's this. That's fine. So much of this is about you starting down the path of increasing your ecological literacy. It's definitely not an end point. I don't know if I've said this quote, but David Shaw had this great quote years ago that a PDC is a great place to start, but it's a terrible place to stop. This is hopefully the beginning or the addition to your ecological literacy, not the ending of it. And the reason why this bookshelf is full is because once you look out into nature and you find, my goodness, look at all of what I can learn, you found a treasure trove of education and exploration and curiosity. So I'm kind of waxing poetically now, so I think it's about time I stop. But that's the point of the local ecology survey, is to really get a sense of that. And so that's how I would go about the researching. That's how I would go about the assignment, and that's how I would think about it. Does that answer the question, Steve? Is there anything else I can add to that?
Well, as a basement dwelling programmer, you telling me that I have to call somebody is horrifying, but you know what? We'll do it. No, this is really useful. I think I get the importance of it, of the getting more of a blueprint and sort of how this session works, so that you can kind of like opt in. What does Andrew say? We're masters of secession. Like that idea kind of fits in. Sorry, masters of secession.
Yeah.
So I see how it fits. I think just the idea of like, where do you sort of start was the hard part, but I think that I have enough of a lead to do it. I probably will not have it available on time, but I will be working on it.
That is totally okay. That's completely fine.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It is a beginning, so it takes time. It totally takes time, and I get it. So that's super fine. Okay, cool. All right. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us. We'll close out the official timing here of the conversation. I'm going to continue on here with Stephen going into cross-section land. I'll stay a little bit later. I really like cross sections. So I'm more than happy to go into this and kind of dive into it a little bit deeper. For everybody else, any questions at all, feel free to email me either through Canvas or through my work email that I passed on to folks there. And yeah, don't have to suffer. You don't have to suffer alone in this conversation. If you're really struggling, we can go through it and walk through it. It's new for everybody. I totally get it. And again, the first time I took my PDC, I didn't get any of this. It was just lecture for 14, 13 days, couple of hands-on, and then do a design in the last 3 days, which is what most intensives are. You know, it's like a lot of great information. You get sort of high on the good times. We're really going into the weeds here with most of you. So I totally get that. Anyways, if you got to go, great to see you. Let me know if you need any help, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. And we'll start taking a look at assignments next week. And if you want to check out any of those courses that I'm currently running or will be running, please do. And that values-based decision-making course will be, yeah, it'll be available for pickup this evening. Oh, and the other thing I'll say is it's a limited series. So we only have, I think, 15 spots in this course. So it's a lot of one-on-one time. All right, let's do it. Okay. So back to this. Back to
Can you hear me now?
a little.
I'm trying to fix my microphone. Okay, I'm sorry I'm making this question, like taking all this time. It's just because I don't know why I didn't understand why I'm trying to do the cross section. I don't think I understood it. I understood it's about the elevation and how the water flows. But then I didn't see the difference between the one side of the line and the other side of the line. It's cross. I didn't understand what's the purpose of the line. That's why I'm struggling.
Okay. Well, maybe this will help with Stephen. And if you're still confused afterwards, why don't you send me an email and we'll set up some time to do a one-on-one. If
you just show his work that he did a line over there. For example, if you could explain to me what's the difference of one side and the other.
Sorry, you got muffled there again.
Yeah, can you open his assignment again?
Yep.
What you did? Because,
yes.
Yeah, so when you did the line on the previous, yeah, for example, what's the difference?
Oh, we lost you again.
What's the difference?
This is like a drive-through. What's the difference between what? Are you still there?
I wrote.
Okay. In the chat. Gotcha.
Yeah.
The chat says top and bottom. Sorry, I'm not sure what that means.
Like the start point and end point?
Difference between both. Well, yeah, I'm kind of confused here. Basically, when we make this line, Diana, there is a red line, right? And in that red line, we've got a start point. Yeah, definitely the Colin. So we've got a start point, which is A, and we have an end point, which is A apostrophe, or sometimes we'll call it A and then B. So when we have those two lines, what we're doing is we're basically saying that we're cutting this landscape directly down this line. It's like taking a knife in a cake and cutting it. And when we do that, we're going to see the topology. We're going to see that change in the gradient. And so when we come down to where we're starting to work here, basically, and I'll kind of draw it just, by memory here, or generally where I think this is how this will happen is we're going to have an A and a B again. So we're going to have our A and our B. So we're going to have our A probably here and our A apostrophe or B there. And basically we're going to translate that line from above. We're going to translate that into some kind of elevation line, just like we took a knife and we cut that property right in half. And then whatever that property cuts through, we're probably going to have the house that's there. We may have a tree or two that goes through. There's that low-lying area, so this actually might come up. So there'll be a water level, something like that. There may be a fence, and then there'll be a imaginary property line that we go through. So that's the basic element that we're going through here. And it looks like a couple of folks are helping you to call in. So we'll wait until maybe you call back in so we can hear you properly, because it's becoming a bit difficult to be able to facilitate that. So hopefully you call back in, and I'm going to go ahead and just work on this. Okay, so
And for a site like Diony's, wouldn't you want to see more like the other buildings around hers? So if you were doing this for a client who's in a high rise like hers, you'd
Yeah.
probably want to see like the height of the buildings around her in cross section. Is that what you would recommend?
yeah. So I would do two things. I would do a cross section of the balcony, just so I know what my heights are and I know where I might put my my raised beds and my different elements like that. And then I'd probably do a pullback of the actual buildings and take a look at the north-south axis and take a look at what I'm getting for solar. That may or may not be of value in a balcony, you know, the level of detail. Here's the thing. This is a course about learning how to do this, and then you have your site. So the bigger conversation is, do you know how to do a cross section in any situation? And then it may or may not be as valuable to your site in terms of specifically what you're doing. So for her and her balcony, I'm still trying to find those other balcony ones. They did like full cross sections of showing the balcony one way and showing the balcony the other way. So that way they saw what the solar angle was coming off of the balcony railing. And they noticed that they had this little shade pocket, and they used that for growing mushrooms. They had this sort of under and over grow bed. So they had a top grow bed, and they had a place where they could they could put in their composting in the bottom of the bed, and then underneath it they were growing mushrooms. And they were also using a lot of vertical stacking, so that had some value. Okay, we'll wait for her to call in, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rattle this off pretty quickly because I want to make sure we at least get one of these pieces done. Okay, so I think what we decided was this was about 16 feet between top and bottom. Yeah, okay, so 16, so 5, 10, 15, 20. So yeah, basically I'm gonna put it just dead center, so that way I've got space to work at the top and the bottom. So I'm gonna go in a little bit, and we're gonna start at 374, and I'm basically gonna match what I'm seeing here. So we've got 374 at the top, and you know what I might do is I may not move this. So I'm not going to go back, and instead I'm just going to use the annotation tool because it's a lot easier to use, but this is going to be on the it's going to be on the zoom layer. So I'm going to have to come back in and do it. All right, cool. So we've got 374. So let's call this 370. Oh, that's terrible. Let's be a little bit more. There we go. 374. So that's 374. Cool. So it does drop 3 feet. So 1, 2, 3. And now we've got 1, 2, 3.5. So that's 35 feet. So that's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So 3 from the top. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. So that's 371. Next, we've got our big run. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're dropping 4. So that's 3. So that's 1, 2, and 1, 2. 1, 2, and 1, 2. So it's 2 down from this main line here. And then we've got many 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and a half and a half. So 80. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And again, we're 2 down from that main line. Cool. Remember when I was doing this before and I was like, oh, I got to make this larger. And then I got distracted by a question. Yeah, that's still the problem. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back onto this and then quickly just put in a little scribble. So I'll scribble here. I'm going to do it again. A scribble here. And I'm going to do it again. A scribble here. And then I'm going to put in text just so I've got this here. 374. And then this is 371, 371, and then do that again. Bring this over, and this is 376. Okay, 376. Now, if I've done this right, and if I clear this,
67, I think.
367. Dyslexia strikes again. Thank you, sir. 367. Cool. I'm going to clear. Sweet. Awesome. Cool. So now we've got these 3 points, and we could throw a line in between them. So we could do a line between point A and point B. And again, if this gets, you can't put it exactly where you need to, you just get in closer. And then we can put in another line and go from here. Oh, it's really good at the start point. It just doesn't like giving you that old end point. There we go. And that's to that one. And then I can zoom out, fit, and then I can add to this. Now we're going to go off screen, but that's okay because we can group this all together and shrink it and do all of that afterwards. So I'm just going to move my zoom bar. And now I'm going to do this double. I'm going to get a bit smarter in this process. Cool. And cool. All right. So 374, this allows us to keep going on. I'm going to go back to zoom. Great. So 367 to 364, again, a 3-foot drop and a 25-foot run. So 3-foot drop takes us to this one, and then 25-foot drop. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So that takes us to here. And that's our 364, 364. And then we've got a 3-foot drop again and a 20-foot rise. So we've got a 1, 2, 3-foot drop, 2 above the 1, and a 20-foot rise. Oh, I gotta go back to this to be able to move things. Oh, but if I move things, I lose it. Okay, back to our line. We'll just put it directly in right now. Here to here. Great, and then we'll bring this over. And 364, and I know Steven's going to be watching me like a hawk if I mess up, which I appreciate. Okay, so that's 364. Takes us to this point, and then from 364 to 361, we've got a 3 drop. 1, 2, 3. So down to here, and I'm starting to get into the groove of it. So I'm just going to do it by 2020, so right to there. Okay, cool. So I'm going to line it again, and it'll be right to, oh, you're going to be like that, aren't you? I'm going to zoom in. Everybody else talks to their computers, right? This is totally normal, right? 364, 361, so that's 361. 361.
I have a rubber duck that I talk to, so I don't look crazy.
Thank you. Now I need a rubber duck. 3 and then 25 feet. So that last one is 3 and 25 feet. So we're going to do a 3 drop and then 25 feet. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, right? And then 3 drop. Cool. So line. I would like another line, please. There we go. And then we're going to drop that 3 feet. Is that right? 1, 2, 3. Is that only 2? No, that is 3. This is just a little low. Okay, cool. And then that last one is what again? 358. Cool. 358. Back over to this one. Grab this guy. Copy and paste. 358. 358. Okay. So we've done this correctly. Now it's actually to scale, which all of yours have to be. It has to be a 1-to-1 scale. And that's actually generally looking like what you had. So then what we go is we come back in here and we take a look at generally where we've got our house here. So our house is basically at this line. So I'm just going to go back here and do this and go up here. So this is the line it goes in, and this is the line it kind of ends in. And now we've got to translate this at scale. So that's 35 feet from this one. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 35, beginning of house. And then house runs for 40 feet. Yeah. 5, 20, 30, 40. Nice. So that's your house. How tall is your house? Do you know the height to the eaves and to the top of the gable?
No, no. Yeah, I'd be guessing. So 8 feet walls, and then the attic's about 5 feet at the ridge. So you can say 14 feet.
14 feet to ridge. Yeah, okay. That's fine.
So from floor of the house to top, I'll say 14,
Okay.
15 feet.
So let's say, and this will just be, so we'll go 14. We'll just kind of make this up as we go along. And then you can come back and you can,
My house is not sloped like that, just in case anyone's curious. We're not.
well, and this is the thing, whenever you build a house, you're always relative to grade, right? So
To the grade, right?
there's going to be a bit of change there regardless.
Mhm.
So
And my drawing has it. There's like the deck is 3 feet up, and then the porch is also 3 feet up, and the front and the back.
right.
So I don't know how important that sort of is, but
Yeah, definitely. So if it crosses, you want to capture. So let's just go ahead
Mhm.
here. Yeah, so we've got a deck and a porch. So are those covered or are those uncovered?
what do you mean by covered?
So is the deck itself, is it a covered, like the roof comes over,
Like-
there's an awning that comes out?
No. One of the pictures there was a picture of the deck. It's just exposed 17 feet, just exposed to the elements.
Okay. So basically what we would do is we come back in here and we would say,
Mhm.
if we zoomed in here,
Yeah.
zoom in. Oh, that's the other one. Zoom in. So we'd come in here and we'd say, great, how long does this deck come from here to here? And it looks,
Mhm.
it looks about 15 feet in terms of this
Mhm.
width as we go in. So we could put that in. And you said it's about 3 feet tall, you said?
3 feet from the ground in both the porch in the front and the deck in the back.
Okay, great. So 3 feet, and it's about, we said, what did we say? 15 feet thereabouts?
Yeah.
15, something like that. So 3 feet up. And is it 3 feet from the base of the house or from its
From
piling?
the ground that's there. So there's whatever, I don't have the terminology. It's the ground. It's got dirt and some plants on it. And then 3 feet up, that's the porch.
Gotcha. So probably something like that.
Mhm.
And again, you'd go and you'd measure to get this totally right. And then you said about the same thing on the back, and about how long does it go in the back?
I have those in my notes. Give me 1 second. I'll be quick. I'll be swift. I promise.
No worries. I think I just made it 10 feet.
Cross section. Yeah, sounds about right. So the porch length is 7 feet 10 inches, and the deck length is 19 feet 2 inches from the cross section that I did. So if you're going on an angle, it'd be a little bit longer. So I guess 20 feet even maybe, and then 8 feet even because you're going kind of sideways, so you're taking up more space.
Sure.
So-
So we can bring that back to 8.
And then so the right is the front, and from your drawing, and left is the back, right?
Right. Cool. So we've got
So-
that deck and we've got that. And then we'd put in the roof, however that might look. So
Mhm.
again, we'd have to go out and do some measurements, but I'm just gonna make stuff up,
Yeah.
which is also fine. I'm gonna do something like this. Call this our eaves, gonna come down to generally the same scope. And then gonna run another line across. Cool. And then does that line, Stephen, does that line that we drew here, does that go over any trees or anything like that?
There would be some on the A, not A prime, but on A. There are some trees. Right on the corner, there's a big old pine tree there.
Okay.
I have to take the measurements of that, but yeah. it's a
Yeah, so
pine
we
tree
would take
there.
that measurement and we'd figure out where that is, and maybe it's 20 feet in, and so we'd then put in the tree itself. And
Okay.
as I say in that tutorial, I'm so fine with just squiggles. That's that's fine.
First
And
try.
and then is there anything further down on that slope that we need to capture?
No. Well, it looks like your So you, in your angle now, there is a forsythia bush that the line goes into that
Okay.
I'm saying now. So that's there. There's a forsythia bush and then a set of clustered unknown species of trees we just got here. And
Kind
it's
of like
winter.
before and after there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I gotta see what if I have a picture of what that looked like before, but I can't ID it yet. But there's a forsythia that's growing, and then
Sure. So in that case, again, just put in
some trees.
your
Yeah,
trees.
it would be way at the A prime area, but everything else is pretty empty.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And then this other thing is, do you know the depth of that wet area? Is that an area that when you've been in it that from the edges? Oh, we need to make this fit. From the edges, do you know what the depth is? If you put a straight line across here, a plumb line, how deep this would get? Like 6 inches, a foot, 2 feet, 3?
No, I'm not sure. I know that from the deepest point to the road, which kind of comes back up, it's 3.5 feet.
From the deepest pit
So
to the road.
So like if you get into the deepest pit and you sort of like look at the road, like I measured sort of what that distance, that rise would be, and it was about 3 feet, 3.5 feet.
5, 6, 7. So it looks about 8. So it looks like the span of the low area is about 80 feet. So I don't think I have 80 feet on here, but we can continue to add. So if we do this and then this, and move this over, it'll give us a little bit more space. Pretty sure the Google gods are going to come down and smite this in a second. I don't think I've ever gone this far over.
And for this assignment, do you recommend a scale of like one grid is 1 foot, which is basically what we're doing here, or is it like what's the thinking there? Is that
you can do whatever you like?
I usually find yourself doing it.
It has to be a relative scale of 1 to 1. So if the square is 10 feet, then the up has to be 10 feet. So generally I want it sized within my paper so that way it's valuable. If it's this big and I can't tell any differences, it doesn't.
Right.
But on the scale of this, it's like being able to tell these differences over the span of this is useful, because you're thinking about, okay, well, do I want to put in a terrace, or do I want to put in, a number of trees on the southeast corner here as it exists? So if I take a look at this and I'm going, well, I know that there's 80 feet and what is this again? These are 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. So I know that 80 to 80 comes back to this same line, which is what, one low. Yeah, so I've got this section right here. I don't want to lose this guy. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1 down. Okay, cool. So if I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 down, I think this is right here. Yeah. So I'd want to know generally, like between these two, you're probably going to get a bit of a curve there, which is fine. But how much of a curve? 2, 3, 4 would be right there. Is all right. It does it this way. I should have done it like that. Right. Okay. Try this again. I remember this. It's been a while since I did this one. So there, and then let's say about there, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, and then back up. So something like that. No, I just want that. So that then gives us a sense that this is a low-lying area, and you go and measure that and figure it out. But that then gives us a sense of where that low is. And so hopefully at this point, we're starting to see the value of this, is that we're seeing what are head heights, where do they look like, especially if we're taking off water from gutters, or we're trying to capture rainwater off the roof. You know that if you've got a rain barrel here and you're going down 10, 40 feet, head pressure is 40% of elevation change. So 10 feet would be 4 psi, 100 feet would be 40 psi. Now you've got that psi rating, and if you can do a trickle pipe or something like that if you're going to start to work at these elevations. The other thing you need to do in your cross section is you need to put elevational heights. So what's the top of this roof, what's the top of this tree, what's the top of this tree. And then in the examples, you'll see that there's the ability to then go through and show what are the successional stages that might be on site, what is the microclimates. Usually good to give us a little plan diagram and showing us where A to A is. Oh, here we go. That's the cross section I've been looking for Diana. Here we go. This is the one. Randolph. Perfect. Amazing. Here's our cross section for the balcony. It was in the examples all along. So here we go. We've got a plan overview. This is A to B, A to B. We're taking a look at what all the elements are. So we've got an overhang that is a bit of a hanging shade apron. We're showing what the balcony is. Here's the potted plants, the stool. Here's a clip art guy he brought in to show, gave us some elements of what the elevation is, or pardon me, what the angle is for the solar angle there. That's awesome. And that also means I can find Randolph's work. There he is. Aha! Great success. Okay, I'm gonna send this to you. Final design. It's right here. Are you still on? Diana, are you still here?
I think she's in the chat.
Okay, here it is. Here's the link. Huzzah. One thing solved today. That's amazing. Cool.
Jonathan,
So,
a couple of quick questions on looking at Steven. So obviously we've sort of worked off the page at this point, and if we were to compress this back down to the page, we wouldn't really have the grid lines anymore. Are you looking for those grid lines for the purposes of this assignment, or if this gets drawn and you don't really need the grid lines? Okay.
I don't need the grid line. So, like in this assignment, if I was doing it in this situation, what I'd probably do is I would delete these grid lines as I'm doing now. Great question. And then what I would do is I would take this and aggregate, and that's everything, group this. Oh, try this again. Is that everything? No, I want this one too. Group, and then, oh, I don't think it picked up this, did it? Weird. Let's try this again. There we go. Group, and then bring it all together. So now this design is actually scaled. What I would do before I did that, though, because I'm a smart human, is I would bring in my scale bar. Bring in the scale bar. Let me zoom in here, and then I would scale that scale bar with everything else, so I didn't have to worry about that. Come here, you. Yeah, sure, I'll take all of that. So I'd come in here, put in yield scale bar. We don't need this, but you should show elevational changes. I'm going to scale this direct. And so what am I doing here? This is a 1/2 So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this over here like this. Put this to this. Oh, I see. I'm going to ungroup this now. There we go. Let's take what I want. There we go. And then bring this out to here. There we go. So now what we have is we've got 50 foot and a 50 foot and a 10 foot. So now this is completely to scale, and just got to change our things here. 10 foot. We'll put this at a 30 foot. And then we'll put this at a 50 foot, and then we'll make this bigger and then put in on 100. Oop.
Javin, another question that comes to mind is in selecting the cross-section location. So initially when I was looking at this, I was thinking, there's one section where there's really a lot of great change in elevation, but it's not really a place that I'm planning on doing anything with in the near future. There's another section that I think would be much more useful for me. Are you going to be looking at that kind of critically if I just explain, you know, this is the area that is useful for XYZ reasons and not necessarily the greatest change in elevation on the property? That's
Yeah,
a legitimate thought
totally.
process. Okay.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Great question. All right, cool. Hopefully now I've thought this through, because I'm thinking this on the fly, which is super fun in front of people. And we're going to group. Aha, smart monkey. Okay. Now we actually have this in scale, and we may come back and change the sizing of different elements here, but now this is completely to scale, and we've got a scale that works with us. And I think we probably lost the way that, yeah, these have mucked up, but that's okay. That is okay. But now we actually have this in scale, and we can come back in and we can do any final details and things of that nature. We can take one of these different elements and you know, make it bigger, so that way we can see that. And make sure, of course, that you put in your units. So feet. I know if I don't do it here, you guys will think you can't do it in yours. Feet, FT. And then from here, you can put in your different areas and your different scales in terms of the microclimates and things of that nature. So we've got our successional stages, our microclimates, all of those pieces. Put in your horizontal title bar. And then the last thing I would do is I would put in our different areas. So of course we'll have to put in AB, so that needs to get in there. And then what this is, so this is basically east by south, pardon me, never east, right? Weed. This is west by northwest to south by southeast. So we would put that in here as well, just to show, excuse me, just to show that. So we'd put in a little arrow, and then on one side we would put south by southwest, and the other one we'd be doing or no, west by northwest and south by southeast. So we put that in there as well. Does that make sense? Why I'd be doing that? So it would be west by northwest, and then this side would be south by southeast. And that's generally just giving us compass points in terms of how this line works. I should give you the full one. So if we were to put the compass on here, large scale, just trying to get a sense of where this generally fits on this compass, and giving us a little bit of compass directions to show what's going on. So the things that are missing on this now, we're missing our microclimate, our succession, we're missing heights on all of these. Maybe a bit of color if we want to. We absolutely do not have to. We'll need some labeling as well. So we'll have to say house, maybe pathway, you know, unidentified tree, as I think Stephen was saying, low area, pooling. I'd put things like that in there. And then we'd have to fix this, which I think is gonna do it like that. Have to fix this to 30. We'd have to fix this to 50. And we'd have to fix this to 100. There we go. Nice. And that gets us a little bit closer, and then we can go in here and fix all of these as well. Stephen, does that make sense?
Yeah, a whole lot. This is really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, man, absolutely. You know, if this is new to you, then you just don't know how to do it, and I totally get that. So I'm glad we went through this whole process and we've got this down. How's everybody else feeling with this now after we've gone through this? Does this feel more accessible? Is there other elements we need to add to this, or to round out your understanding of it? I'm gonna go check the chat. It's been a while. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Haha. Awesome. Thanks so much. Nice. Awesome. Okay, great. Fantastic. Hopefully, like me, you'll get to love cross sections and really use them. The one thing I'll warn you against is the Google Earth elevational tool is not scaled 1-to-1, and so you can't use it for this assignment, or else I will tell you to do it again, because we need that 1-to-1 ratio so everything is in scope, because as we take a look at this, this will be important. And then what we'll do is when we come into design, and this is why it's good to think about this beforehand, you know, what does this look like and what are we doing with this? When we come into design, we might come in here and go, okay, well, yeah, I can definitely see a swale or two in here. So we're probably going to cut in here and come up here and probably cut down here and come up here. Maybe we're actually going to dig out this lower area and turn this into an actual pond. So we're actually going to do a bag and borrow pit. So we're going to do something like this. Now this is great for volumetrics because it's like, okay, that's a lot of earth. What am I going to do with that earth? So yeah, digging something out is great, but what do we do with it? If you're in a situation like that, Stephen, if that's of interest to you, I would look up crater gardens, Krater, K-R-A-T-E-R, by Sepp Holzer. And so what he ends up doing, and this might be a good idea for you, especially by the road, is that this A pit becomes above ground terrace garden that kind of comes up like this, depending on how this slope looks. That was terrible. Let's try that again. And much better. So this A becomes this B. And what ends up happening here is that depending on the water levels that come into an area, sometimes it'll fill up, sometimes it'll draw down, but you can then have different planting areas. And for anybody who's thinking about ponds, I'd explain this to a good friend of mine who got some bad advice from another designer. The way we resist evaporation is by having deeper depths within a pool of water instead of having the same depth. So when I went over to Africa, they had all of these tilapia ponds that were this depth. They were all the same depth. And sure enough, that water increased temperature at the same rate and evaporated at the same rate. Everything happened at the same rate, and they couldn't keep fish alive. And so when I went in there, I just taught them about stepped ponds, pardon me. And what happens is with this stepped pond, you end up with what's called a cool column. And what that means is that this cool column here is a deep area that resists warming. And so as water warms at the top and as this cools, you get this really cool thermal siphon that acts like so. Where this cool water warms up here, and then as it comes here, it sinks, and it actually creates a little bit of movement in that pool. But most importantly, this then resists evaporation. Without this cool column, without this depth, you'll get an evaporation pool, and it'll just, if it's a singular depth, how does that apply in the winter? It usually means that this area becomes an area that is open, and this is a place where fish can overwinter because this area will resist freezing because it's got more thermal mass from a energy perspective. So it's got that ability. So yeah, if I was in your situation, Stephen, I would start to evaluate if this had any merit, doing something like this, doing a bit of a crater garden around here, and just look up crater gardens and some of the images that Sepp's done, because I think there's some good value there, and just turns this whole area. I'm going to lose all this, so I'm just going to clear this.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. I'll definitely look into it.
Yeah. I'm just going to do this whole thing, copy, paste. And then here, delete. Yeah, so, this area could become this entire garden that has a self-watering aspect to it. And this might be your major growing zone. Now, obviously, some of this is on the easement or the urban annex. So you probably would only be able to work on this side of it. But I think that has a lot of merit to evaluate. All right, we are into the full second hour of this, which is fun, but definitely going a little long. So thanks everyone for sticking with us. Pretty much everyone stayed. That's amazing. Always learning. Thank you so much. Yeah, you guys are so welcome. Happy to go through this. Happy to make mistakes in front of people, because that's the point. That's what happens. You go through something, you're like, oh, right, one of those squares is 10 feet. Gotcha. That's why this looks weird. So that happens, it happens all the time. Your brain's skipping ahead and something happens and you have to look at it and you go, yeah, that doesn't make sense. But that's part of it. Happens all the time. happens all the time. And so it's just being kind to yourself and kind to each other and just going, oh, interesting. I think you could do some work on that there. Thanks so much, folks. We didn't get a chance. Well, we did. We went through the cross section, and we went through the local ecology survey. If you're still having problems, reach out to me. Let me know. Happy to do some one-on-one time. Happy to answer questions via Canvas if you want to send me an email. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for the thanks. That's super, super lovely. I appreciate that. All right. See ya in the next one. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Javin.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye now.